We appreciate everybody showing up today.
Yes, we do.
And so we'll just start with the first question. Good to have you back, Andrew and Julia. Okay, after studying the teachings of the Venus Project, now when people show me the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this pyramid makes no sense to me, but because of semantics and that it doesn't take our society into account. What do you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
I think that Maslow is sincere. I think he's a good person, but I don't think he has any idea of what the problem is. It isn't the hierarchy of needs. It's if you want to put 20 people on the moon or 50 people on the moon, you have to provide so much food, so much water, and so much of the necessities of life. You do that first. You don't put down the hierarchy of needs. You show how to meet those needs.
If all values are learned and may be inappropriate, what are more appropriate values? Is there a method of arriving at more appropriate or more relevant values?
I just stated that in the beginning. The more appropriate values is to provide for those needs. You have to build, if you want to put 4,000 people on so many acres of land, you have to provide water, soil, and the conditions for those people to survive. If they need warmth and love, you have to show how to attain that. You must attain that, not say these are what people need. If you say the people of Africa need food, how do you provide that? You say the people of Africa need shelter. They need not only food, they need restoration of the environment. How do you do that? Only through education and providing the facilities to meet those needs.
Yeah, that's what the Venus Project is all about, introducing a process level as to how to do that. Okay. Are you able and willing to sign petitions, being that you are not for profit and he had heard that you can't sign petitions and work for a nonprofit? I'm not aware of that. Okay, I'll go on. That's kind of irrelevant. Oh, then this person again is saying, are you aware that there are many cases of UFOs that can't be explained away, as well as large crop circles, because they're too complex, that they're not hoaxes?
Well, that's not a question, that's a statement. I was hired by the publishers of the book called Behind the Flying Saucers. I've never met anyone that was able to describe the interior of the flying saucers, those that have been captivated and taken away from the planet, and those that spoke with the Saucerians. The language is very similar to what happens today. It's projected. It was not based upon scientific facts. I asked them what the interior was like, and they said there were big leather straps on the seats. Well, anyone that can fly millions of years through space does not need thick leather straps in a flying saucer. They don't need blinking lights. That comes from Hollywood. Most of the descriptions are based on Hollywood presentations. All of the features of the Saucerians look alike from previous released photographs. The crop circles are really crap circles, because anyone from another planet will not use symbols that people do not understand. That shows their lack of understanding of the people of the earth. In other words, it's ridiculous. You don't make crop circles. You bring information to the world. If you wish to influence people, you provide a need for cancer, heart disease. You give them answers to problems, then they will listen to you. You don't make crop circles. It's so ridiculous that it's rejected on the basis of its lack of communication.
What do you do with delinquents in the time of the transition?
You mean people that don't behave in accordance with the Venus Project's proposals? Is that what you mean by delinquents? I'm not sure of what you mean, but if you mean people that are out of touch with reality, we help them back to reality as best we know how.
You said the Venus Project only bases things on tests of scientific matter, tested scientific matter. I hear you say many times, I think and I believe. Is that scientific?
No, it's not. But it's the only language that I know people are familiar with out there.
From a project management perspective, the risks to a project increase as you include more changes. I'll just go. Are you concerned about trying to change too many things at once?
That's why we make films and videotapes. It isn't up to me to do it. The more tapes you got out there, the more information you release to the public. It doesn't require Fresco or Roxanne Meadows changing people. The more devices you have for social change, the greater the change.
I wouldn't be too concerned about changing things too quickly. I'm kind of more afraid of not changing things fast enough, it seems. Okay, that's about the end of the questions that we have. I'll check the box here, Andrew, that you have.
Yeah, we've got a few in there.
Would you like to see society oriented by the methods founded through behaviorism?
No, you have to name specific aspects of behaviorism in order to get conclusions. In other words, if you just words like, are you going to bring up new society with behavioristic principles? You have to name those principles, and I'll tell you what I think of them. I don't know your interpretations of behaviorism. I really don't know. I know different people read it and they understand it in different ways. So in order to become familiar with the language, in order to communicate with other people, they have to have similar interpretations.
And are there aspects of behaviorism that you kind of adhere to that you would agree with in your own interpretation?
The only aspects of behaviorism that I agree with is the fact that environment affects behavior and your values and your language and your facial expressions and all aspects of your interrelationship with others come from the environment you're reared in.
Did you ever work closely with psychologist Jacque when it comes to the concepts utilized by the Venus Project?
No, I did not.
Do you want to talk about your history, Jacque?
It wouldn't serve any purpose to talk about it, but all language, as I said before, that was a long time ago, is subject to interpretation. We have to devise a language that is not subject to interpretation, like mathematics, chemistry, which I've said this many times, not because I like saying it, because you seem to ask the same questions. If you want to know anything about the operation of the Venus Project, consult with Roxanne Meadows, Jacque Fresco, or any of the members out here that work with it constantly. Andrew Buxton can tell you quite a bit about it.
Ben also. And I just want to mention that Jacque was a childhood friend of Jacque's, and Jacque really introduced him to science. Jacque introduced Jacque to science and the ideas of the Venus Project when he was young. I don't know how much experience he had with it or what. Yeah. What do you think about open source? Well, I think we went over this question many times. I would refer to the earlier questions and answers. Would you have input?
Yeah, this is the recording November 6 and starting minute 34.
Thanks, Ben. This person's saying he's new to the project. If you were to have a resource-based economy, how would unnecessary material goods such as computers, unnecessary? Okay, yes. Such as computers, televisions, and so on be owned in the society, materials that are not necessarily for life. Does that go on? Yeah, I guess you really should read more about the resource-based economy.
All of the equipment which is accessible, again, like the public library. I have to say that again and again. All materials will be like the public library, where you can access books, computers, any kind of referential material, musical instruments, whatever you need is available. It's instead of a lawnmower in every home, there are access centers for lawnmowers. When you're through using it, they're brought back to the access centers or shipped back to the access centers where they're updated to meet the needs of the future. I would imagine that in the distant future, we would stunt grass so it only grows 2 inches high, and so you don't need a lawnmower. In other words, the future of scientific research is to try to do away with as much equipment as possible.
This person is saying that he doesn't agree, or she doesn't agree with music or art as being a nothing thing. And the person mentions music and art inspire, they want your comments on these three things. They feel it inspires individuals to do other things. It allows the individual to relax and express and deal with their emotions. Practice for creating other functional pieces later on. Do you agree with these in regards to art and music, or why not?
Not at all. I do not agree. I think there are better ways than music. There's direct information which you can apply to people if you want them to learn things. You can play all the music in the world. It doesn't alter behavior, change values, or provide information. It's a mood-setting condition, just like relaxation. If you meditate on your navel, you'll have a good image of the navel and nothing more. If you learn to play chess, it will not improve your brain, it'll improve your chess games only.
You might be able to relax, but it doesn't give you the ability or the mental capacity or the tools to deal with problems out there. You know, you have to do a lot of study and work for that.
A musician is not able to increase agricultural yield. A musician is not able to plan cities. A musician is not able to plan educational techniques or add to geometry, mathematics. Musicians can provide music. It can entertain people, which means nothing in particular.
This person is asking, and I'm not aware of this. This person is asking about a city of knowledge that will be built in Ecuador. I'm not aware of that. I'll have to look that up. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I'm not aware of it.
In the Venus Project, wouldn't there be governmentally controlled way of controlling the world population? Have to have a go.
That would be based on the carrying capacity of the Earth's resources. I've said that many times. In other words, you cannot have a population in excess of the carrying capacity of the Earth's resources. If you do, you'll have malnutrition, territorial disputes. I've said this many times. People keep asking the same questions.
Do you think that you'd have to end up doing forced abortions?
No, you don't have to force anything. Education to me means that if you have a population in excess of what the resources can provide, you're going to have trouble. People have to be educated to understand. You never put 500 passengers in an airliner if its specifications are to carry 150 passengers. It won't get off the ground if you did that. And they don't even do that because they know what the capacity is of aircraft, trains, ships, always. If you have a population on the ship more than that ship can provide, you'll have trouble on the ship. If you take 1,000 passengers, you must take so much water, so much food to take care of those passengers. If you fail to do that, you'll have problems proportionate to the degree of failure to comply with the carrying capacity of the ship.
Are you familiar with John Bowlby's attachment theory? I don't know if I pronounced that right, which means establishing a secure base for a child with a parent in order to explore their environment and comfort to prevent any childhood trauma or emotional problems. Do you condone this approach when it comes to parenting?
Not necessarily the parents. The parents apparently are not as qualified. The proof is that you send your kids to school because you don't know how to do it. Then you send your kids to high school. Then you send your kids to college to pick up a profession. Parents do not seem able to provide for those needs. They don't know enough about psychology, about human behavior to make that child feel secure. They only know what they've been subjected to, which is a lot of hogwash.
Do you have a team of sociologists, psychologists, and behavioral biologists that are working with you? If not, I don't know what this is. Are looking forward to build one. I'm not sure, but do you want to address
We
that?
have a process for educating people, and it has nothing to do with today's methods of education. What we do is inform children how they relate to nature, how nature provides for human needs, that soil is not necessarily good. Soil can be enriched, soil can be damaged, soil can be deficient, so you'd have to have agronomists that decide the condition of the soil. And you'd have to provide food that is not necessarily empty of the nutrients needed. You can grow carrots on exhausted soil and it can have a low level of keratin. Eating certain types of foods is not necessarily the answer. The soil also has to be rich. The conditions for growing food have to be appropriate to that need. And humans have to have warmth, love, but I don't like to use those words. They have to live under the conditions that provide for those needs. You cannot just list the needs of people without providing the methods of supplying those needs. And that's what the Venus Project concerns itself with, providing the methods to supply needs that humans have to acquire in order to attain sustainability.
Roxanne, can I just say something on that one, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Yeah, so the question was, do we have a team of sociologists and psychologists, etc., working with you? We do have a technical database. It's global. You can find this on our website at thevenusproject.com. We've got something around 2,000, 2,100, something like that. Scientists and technicians, engineers, architects, etc. You know, people from the medical fields, all sorts registered on the database. As you know, the projects and the teams that you see now, these are all in early development. You know, we only started them sort of earlier on this year, end of April, and because of that, obviously, there's, you know, we're getting more and more people gradually getting more interested in helping out. So the teams are starting to build up now, and things are starting to sort of progress. There are specific projects at the moment, for example, the Corson project in the software development team that is actually utilising that database. And basically what we do is we contact the relevant people or relevant professions that we need for a specific part of the project. and we asked them, if they'd like to be involved in the project. Once they've sort of said yes, they want to, then that team gets built based on those needs. As and when projects become available, or we projects began, we'll be using that database more and more. So, for example, in the new year, we're looking at starting up the architectural team and the 3D team again. Obviously, they've been put on hold while we were building up the global teams. Those specific projects will be using a lot of the technicians, a lot of the CAD designers and 3D modelers and architects, etc., from our global scientific and technical database. So yes, we do have people sort of working with us on these things, but specifically with psychologists and behavioural biologists, etc., not at the moment. There aren't any projects that really involve those people at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. This question, I recently discovered that Peter Joseph and the Venus Project parted some time ago. And the answer to why usually is two things. Peter did not refer to the Venus Project as much as necessary, and Peter didn't bring the necessary financial support to the Venus Project. During the time we were associated with the Zeitgeist movement, we really had very little to no participation in the movement. It was really Peter's movement. We discussed what was going to go on before he started it, but we were really never consulted with anything, and it went off in different directions. And it was, so we we really didn't have much or anything to do with it. No, the parting was not at all because Peter did not bring financial support into the Venus Project. That was not it. Oh, and then he goes on, when I discovered Jacque being covered on, okay, and then the person is asking about the exemplar 0, what we have, what affiliation we have with them, what we're doing with them. We really don't have any affiliation with them. We met with the head of that group, Sasha, when we were in England for a day, and they had given Jacque an award, 2011 award, for something. You can look that up on the website exemplar0.org, which was very nice. They wanted to have some ceremony in different parts of the world. They were talking about doing that, but it's almost the end of the year, and it was a 2011 award, so I don't think they'll be doing that. We haven't heard from them recently. So they were just trying to honor Jacque's life's work. And that's about it. That's our involvement with them. How many years have you both been working on the Venus Project? I've been working with Jacque for about 35 years. And how long have you been doing it? Jacque's been arriving at it for about a lifetime of work. Okay, would you agree that when adults express aggression or violence towards another person during their adult life, this is because the individual's emotions are stuck in childhood, which they haven't yet unboxed and dealt with in a rational sense?
Well, that's one way of talking about it, but there's nothing in the environment that helps them understand their values, or how values are acquired, or how behavior is modified.
There's really nothing to unbox. If you don't learn how to deal with problems, or you don't learn how to be rational, there's nothing in you that you have to unleash or unbox. You haven't been taught that in your environment. You haven't picked it up with the books you've read or the teachers that you've had. So you might deal with things in a very childish way, because that's the only way, that's the only tools you've acquired in society.
Besides your motion pictures, your heroes, your role models, all of them set your behavior and your values.
Have you ever been invited to TED Talks? Jacque was invited. I know a lot of people suggested that Jacque be invited to TED Talks. And a couple of years after that, after they got bombarded with letters about Jacque, and I know that because when we first had our website up after the Zygotes Addendum first came up, one of the things I put on it in terms of what people can do is to write to Ted. And the very next morning, their secretary wrote me and said, please don't tell people to write. They can't even get into their email. They have so many people asking for Jacque to be on. They said that they were full for the next year. And a couple years later, we heard from them, and Jacque got invited to speak as, I don't know the exact word, but some senior kind of senior citizen section that they have, which meant that Jacque would have to pay $2,000 to be a part of that, and he was obligated, I don't know the exact number, but it was something like, as I remember, he would have had to have traveled to 3 different portions of the world and to do 3 different lectures, and they only gave him economy, the money for economy class to do that. Jacque at his age, and I think most seniors, have to travel with their feet up, so he has to go business, which is, you know, a necessity for his health at his age, so there wouldn't be any blood clots. And I always travel with him. So all in all, we could not afford to accept that. We couldn't afford the $2,000, and we couldn't afford the flights that were mandatory for him to accept that position. That was our experience with Ted. Although we did write to them about this contest that they're having this year about the city, and they're supposed to acknowledge that the end of February, I think February 29th. So I don't know what will happen with that. In the previous week's, next question, in the previous week, someone mentioned the documentary All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace. Jacque, you, oh, that was the film I was looking for again. Jacque, you said you would look it up. You said you would look at it. Give us another week on that, because I watched part of it, and then I wanted Jacque to see that, and I couldn't remember the title. I couldn't get back to it. So I will write that down now, and we will look at that. I didn't watch the whole thing. Okay, I'll get that later. What are good jobs to pursue in this society to learn the most or be the closest to the learning structure of the future?
The more knowledge you have in science, meaning biology, sociology, the history of civilization, the more knowledge you have, the more factual knowledge, I should say, the more contributions you can make to a better future for humanity.
What will happen to people like psychopaths?
They will be treated with the best equipment we have and the best knowledge we have to try to undo the behavior that is detrimental to themselves and other people.
This person is asking, they feel it can be genetic.
I believe their genes, the only major portion that the genes serve is the shape of the body, propensity towards certain ills, but the genes do not give you a value system. That's acquired by your society. Race prejudice, bigotry, the acquisition of wealth, selfishness is all learned. That is not inborn. The genes contribute very, very little to actual values. That's picked up by society.
This person is asking about communes. What do you think of experiments with communes?
Well, you can experiment with communes if you want to, and you can try to find newer ways of growing food. But communes are not the answer to the future problems of society. They have to be brought together. They have to share the resources of the earth equally. And when all the nations join together as one unit, working on problems that are common to all people, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and the rest of those problems, until we work on all problems common to human beings, We must refrain from maintaining armies, navies, prisons, police. All that part is part of the monetary establishment. It has nothing to do with survivability, except survival of that particular nation with military force.
A lot of times the communes too, they stay together while they're building, while they're all engaged in something, but after that they start to have quarrels and there are problems. They really have no definite directions, or they don't have that many different values than what are in the general public.
Well, actually, people are not trained in methods of sharing ideas without getting angry. They have to learn how to listen to new ideas, and they have to learn how to ask questions, which they haven't learned yet. It's hard for people to pinpoint a question. They usually talk all around the subject. If you really want to learn how to pinpoint the questions, you have to study what the factors are that shape human behavior, and you have to learn how to redesign that so that the behavior is more appropriate, not only for the individuals, but the people that they deal with and associate with.
This person is asking about what kind of education you would do for kids, but I think there's been a lot mentioned about this in the last questions, and many of the last questions and answers. Maybe you should look through that, unless you want to deal with any of that again.
Well, I can repeat that again. The kind of education for the future would depend on the state of human affairs. If there's great scarcity or overpopulation, meaning more people than the resources can provide for, then we have to learn how to live within those systems. If we can devise answers to providing an abundance for all people, the design of the culture will be based upon that. I cannot tell you what people will do. If they engage in nuclear war and make the environment unlivable, there's nothing we can do about it. In other words, it depends on how much damage society inflicts upon people. It isn't up to me. We don't have any control. Roxanne and I, or Joel or Larry, have no control over the environment. So don't put it upon us. We're not in charge.
I think
Oh, the kind of education for kids would be relevant to how nature and humans interact. The kind of education for kids would be the nature of the technology at the time. Well-informed people who don't talk around the subject but get right to the point. In other words, when I worked for the aircraft industry, they asked me to think up new ideas. I can't do that unless you tell me what your problems are. What are your problems? Then I can think of an idea. In other words, if an airplane goes into a spin and you have difficulty getting out of that spin, you turn your wingtips, just the wingtips, down against the spin. That'll cut the continuation of the spin. In other words, you have to state the problem in order to find a solution. I said the kids will be educated in the relevance of conditions that they live under. In other words, they'll be educated to learn how they interact with nature, with how to interact with one another, and how to have different values without getting angry at the next person. They will learn the methods of science and learn how to apply them to human relations and the environment. They will learn that if you destroy the environment, you destroy life. You must take care of the environment that supports life.
Do you have any specific methods when rehabilitating a violent offender in society during the transition? For example, do you support some of the methods utilized by psychoanalysis?
No, I do not. I believe that if you want people to learn how to behave in the most useful manner and constructive manner. You have to specifically take the culture and redesign it. It's the culture itself that produces aberrant behavior. And if we don't redesign the culture and the value systems that are dominant in today's world, you'll have the same problems over and over again. We have to change the way we operate to a resource-based economy.
Do you think we have enough time to react against global warming?
That depends on how much work people do to try to change their fellow human beings. If you do nothing, nothing will happen. If you go to work on people, showing them the advantages of a resource-based economy, that would be very significant in helping to change people.
This person's asking about what about the idea of developing a game to introduce the concepts of a resource-based economy. Do you want to talk about this at all, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. If you look at the Venus Project's website, let me just get you the link, one sec. Okay, I've just put the link in the chat. You'll see that the TVP design team, we've got a list of projects that we aim to develop over the coming years. Most of these projects are large-scale projects, probably spanning years, not necessarily months. One of those projects is the development of a Venus Project game, which we intend to use as a funding mechanism for the Venus Project's aims and proposals, such as the movie project. The difficulty we've got with that is that obviously many people play games and many people want to participate in that and help out on developing a TVP game. The problem is that it's a very technical process and it requires a lot of skill in very technical areas, and also experience in developing games, etc., to actually produce something and to do it in a relatively sane timescale. So at the moment we're actually looking for specific experienced game developers, game artists, 3D modelers, etc., to begin work on developing these things. You'll probably find that the game project itself will come at a later date after we've started doing some of the 3D modeling, because the first project we're going to be doing in January or February, depending on how quickly I can get freed up on some of these other projects, is to develop the architectural team and start getting some of Jacque's designs developed into working sort of preliminary drawings, if you like. Those drawings will then go to the 3D teams, which I'll be heading up, and we'll be developing the 3D models and the 3D visualizations, etc., for use in a computer game and also in a simulation, which will be combined with our Corsen project from the software development team, which will be a kind of RBE simulation of what a city would be like, how the city would function, how energy would be harvested and distributed in the city, etc., etc. So there is a lot of stuff going on in the background there to getting these teams up and running. As you can imagine, they're big projects, and normally you'd have teams, you would have large companies working on these with full-time staff, paid staff, which means that you've got people working full-time on them. Unfortunately, we're working with volunteers that are putting in whatever hours they can in their spare time, which obviously we're hugely grateful for. But it does limit the amount of work that we can actually get done, unfortunately, in this monetary system that we're in. So the short answer is yes, we are working towards developing all of these things. It's really down to the amount of contribution we get and the amount of experienced people that we have available to us to do those projects.
Thanks, Andrew. Next question, can you elaborate on what happened in regard to Peter Joseph's contacts with Ridley Scott and his idea to deliberate a package could move amongst the higher-ups, okay, that could go to the higher-ups of Hollywood? I couldn't tell you. I heard him mention it a couple times, but I have no idea what happened. If anything, I don't think anything happened. This person is mentioning that one way of getting funding for the film is to have different companies advertise within the film. We will probably look at all of that when the time comes. And then somebody's saying we should make a teaser trailer. We will, of course, be doing that. Okay, this person's asking, the New Zealand project made a beautiful website and landed a project of building a city, island on the water. What's your point of view about it? I don't know anything about what the New Zealand project is doing. They're doing an island on the water. I don't know. Some people are afraid that the phrase Earth's resources also include people themselves, and therefore think that the resource-based economy is about slavery. How does the Venus Project respond to that?
Well, eventually, all people that can provide a service for this country to make it better, and all the world's people, the people that are capable of providing for food, education, information. We cannot do anything without information. For example, a sincere person, a very honest person that knows nothing about electronics cannot service your equipment. We don't need sincere people. We don't need decent people. We need people that have the competence to handle the problems that confront us.
I would say in terms of making people slaves in the future, this is quite the opposite of what we're talking about. I'd say today people are slaves because they have to make money, they have to get jobs. They can't do that they want to do because they can't make money at it, so they have to go into something else that a lot of times are really remedial jobs in order to make money. So they're being forced to do things that they don't want. The Venus Project is quite the opposite. You have to make money today to get the things you need. In the future, you will be supplied with the things you need, whether you work or you don't work. You don't need that many people to oversee everything, to make things work in the future, especially when we automate faster and faster. That's the idea, is to get people away from mundane jobs, enable them to do whatever they're interested in doing. And people participate more when they're doing things that are interesting, learning how to solve problems and working on problems that are problems to everyone.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So you get all types of fearful things. And yes, people would be looked at as a resource, our most valuable resource, but not in the way that they're talking about. These are science fiction movies that put those types of notions in people's heads, and those are things you just really have to explain that to people. Since most psychological ill health would theoretically be minimized in the resource-based economy, we see psychologists playing in the operation of a resource-based economy. For example, would they act as consultants, construction engineers when building physical environment or social life? You can just answer that. I don't need to go on. Go ahead.
That will be phased out. Psychology will be phased out, and the study of behavioral science would take its place. The conditions that shape behavior and the conditions necessary to undo aberrant behavior that is not useful for people. Most psychiatry would be phased out, except neurology would be strengthened, and the behavioral sciences would be strengthened rather than speculative opinion about different causes of human behavior. There would have to be fundamental facts gathered which show how behavior evaluates, how behavior is installed, how some people are able to accept things and others are not. We study the mechanisms involved in human behavior, and we provide people the tools for solving problems. Instead of you having to go to a psychologist, in your early days in school, you are given information as to how to grow, how to attain more information, and how to test the validity of information. Whether you accept it or not will be based upon the methods that you are given. In other words, I've said this again many times, to be an engineer, you have to go to an engineering environment. To be an agronomist, you have to go to an agronomy environment, or plant physiologist. In other words, you have to study the subject in order to work at the subject. But there are many people with good intentions that do no studying at all, that mean well, but have nothing really to add to society to make it work better.
Okay, my little brother only plays video games. I don't know any method to take him out of that.
It isn't your little brother. It's the whole of society that's loused up. We have to redesign the culture, which includes methods of changing his behavior.
Will the Venus Project participate in TED Prize 2012 City 2.0, excuse me. Yes, we've already sent something in, and a few other people have sent something in regarding the Venus Project City as well. So we are waiting. Do you believe that the core values of the Venus Project can coexist in today's current model as we transition from one to another? And if so, how?
I don't understand the question.
Can we uphold the values of the Venus Project in today's society?
If it's not applied, it's useless. Only if it's applied does it make the world a better place. The Venus Project, as a personal verbal hobby, can only be used to inform people as to the direction of the Venus Project. If you get enough people informed and they demand that it be installed, it will be installed. But if you don't affect enough people, the transition will be painful.
And it's very difficult to uphold the value system of a resource-based economy in today's society because you really can't share goods and resources. When they mention people are kind, how kind? You open the doors to everyone that doesn't have a home or doesn't have food. You can't house, feed, and clothe everyone in today's. And if you want to maintain a job today, you have to watch what you say. So either you have to weigh whether it's too painful for you not to talk about your values and what you feel, or you live under a bridge or in the streets if it's too painful not to do that. So it's very difficult. The whole system, it's a very different value system within a resource-based economy. Even the notion of non-competitiveness, you couldn't share your knowledge with other corporations turning out the same products because you'd lose your competitive edge. So it can't apply at all. It's a totally different system. Okay, it seems to me that humans projecting values into the future in the same way as they project into the past. Please give examples of mental tools and processes which you use to envision the future.
Well, the first thing you have to ask is what kind of world do you want? What kind of behavior in humans would be optimal for the benefit of everybody? You have to arrive at what it is you believe you want. Then you have to design the methodology for attaining what you want. If you don't do that, you cannot attain it. If you insist that people become sane, nothing will happen unless you provide the methods for improving sane behavior and redefine your terms. The methods of today's value systems have very little to offer. What's the next?
It's often hard to talk about the basis of the Venus Project. Do you have tips for us?
Read the book, The Best That Money Can Buy. Read the books recommended on the book list on the website. In other words, you can get our website. It's www.thevenusproject.com. After you look at our website and read some of the books we recommend that you read, you will have more tools to talk about it and think about it.
This question is from the same person who asked about music. How do you suggest people should or will be able to deal or control their emotions on a more general, well, you want to just do that one first?
Yeah, you don't have to control your emotions. Emotions will be more relevant in the future, meaning if you identify with a given project, you work on it. If you don't identify with it, you explain the limitations of the project. In other words, there are people in America today and other countries that believe in torturing people. You have to come up with a way of gathering information without torturing. Instead of saying, don't torture, what do you suggest? In other words, I'm against torture because I have other means of acquiring information. I have other means of changing people's behavior without hurting them. I feel that information regarding the world we live in is the only way to work. You have to work within conditions that exist. You cannot work in some theoretical environment. The Venus Project proposes a method or many different methods and provides the tools, the language, the methodology for achieving a Venus Project. It is not up to people in general. It's up to those people that work on methods for achieving the Venus Project.
Okay, Aman.
I don't know what you mean by emotions. All I'm talking about is when you identify with real problems. In other words, if you notice that people lack certain kinds of food, or they lack food in general, the only contribution you can make is to be able to grow more food per acre without exhausting the soil. You have to come up with solutions, not feeling, oh my God, the world is a terrible place. What do you suggest? When a person says there's a lot of corruption in business, what do you suggest to eliminate it? If you have nothing to suggest, then you can offer nothing to society. You have to develop methods of overcoming problems, not merely talk about the problem. If you say there's a lot of corruption in business and government, what do you suggest to eliminate it? If you don't have anything to suggest, I suggest that you shut up or find out or go to work on the problem. I'm not talking about emotions. I'm talking about doing something about it. If you do nothing about it, nothing will happen. It isn't emotions that we need. We need sane approaches to problems. Emotions are the result of insufficiency. We become angry. We become frustrated because we don't have any answers. That's what generates emotions. But in the future, all emotions will be translated into some form of action pattern. If you don't want war, you have to provide for those needs of a nation that invades another nation. Nations do not invade other nations to bring democracy. They invade other nations because they have resources we want or cheap labor. We don't go there to make life better for other people. We go there to take advantage of other nations. And until that system stops, until we go to help other nations and work with them toward the unification of all the world's people and give them all equal shares of the Earth's resources, and if there's a shortage, to develop alternative systems to meet those needs. If you fail to do that, the system will not work. If you wish to know how we intend to solve problems, frame your question. But don't come off and tell me that, what are we going to do about this, or what are we going to do about that? Just say, how would you handle this or that particular problem, and we'll try to answer it for you.
If people are considered as resources, would people be forced to work?
Never. Never would they be forced to do anything. They have to learn that if you want more harmony in the world, you have to learn how to impart that information to people and get them to work together. If you cannot achieve that, then you cannot do it by force.
Does Jacque agree that babies start to learn since they are in the womb?
Only movements. If they move their arms, they build connective associations, but they do not pick up any value systems in the womb. They only pick up movement, turning of the head, movement of the arms and legs. Yes, that is learned.
And nutrition, if the mother is stressed, or, there's certain things the baby needs in the womb,
Yeah,
of course.
well, we have to meet those needs, and mothers in the future will be given the most appropriate diet and brought up under conditions of minimum stress when they're carrying a child.
Is there a scientific consensus on the rate of automation?
I can't do a scientific consensus because I don't believe it exists. If there were such a thing as scientific applied methods, you wouldn't have war, prisons, police, conflict, stupidity, the Democrats lying about the Republicans, and the Republicans lying about the Democrats. We are so far from being sane that we're not even civilized yet.
Are you familiar with David Wilcox?
No.
Okay, we'll look him up. Okay. How will mental illness brought upon by brain damage or other unforeseen occurrences be dealt with in a resource-based economy?
Well, there would only be neurology, the study of the nervous system, how the brain works, and how the brain, if damaged, can be repaired. We will study the cultivation and development of neural associational systems. And once we learn how the neurons store information, transfer information, and act upon information, we won't be able to do anything. So we have to do a lot of research. There are a lot of things today that are not fully understood. And we have to understand more about the working of the nervous system and the brain in order to do anything, to really help people.
It says, I wondered how Jacque sees the transition from a monetary system to a resource-based economy through global protests or global financial meltdown.
Global protests do nothing unless you inform people as to what a better society would be, how it operates, how it takes care of differences in values. If you don't inform people, protests do nothing.
I think a good example of that is in Egypt. They really protested. They got rid of their leader. They protested that they wanted more participation, a piece of the pie. And now they have a worse dictatorship, a military dictatorship, and more violence to people there now.
Without providing the method of attaining social and dynamic equilibrium, you have nothing.
That's the job today, is to point out a positive alternative. That's about all I see with the questions. Does anybody have anything else they want to say?
There's one last one in there, Roxanne.
How do you deal with different people's values? How do you make them change to the values of the Venus Project recommends? the
If
value.
you accept the Venus Project, try to impart to other people what made you change. In other words, show them more about methods of arriving at decisions rather than making decisions. If you don't know what that means, it means that an engineer who supplies a cable for a bridge doesn't know what that cable can do, so he puts it under stress, torsional stress. He puts the beams under compression stress, and he arrives at conclusions, and that's the best he can do. You must arrive at conclusions, not make them without putting things to test.
I also think a good thing initially is trying to show people how they got their beliefs and their values, that it's not really theirs, that they pick it up from the environment, and introduce just whose benefit those values that they have are serving.
That's very good, Rox.
Okay, I guess that's about it.
Yep, that's all of them. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for your questions. Hopefully you got all the answers you were looking for. If you didn't, please check out the seminar room's description. We've got some information on there where you can find more information about the Venus Project and a resource-based economy. Check out our YouTube channel, loads of videos on there, hundreds of hours of Jacque talking on a variety of subjects relating to this direction. Thank you, Jacque and Roxanne, for coming. It's good to be back with you all again, and yeah, I'll be hanging around for a little bit after this meeting just to go over some of the stuff with TVP design projects as requested. And thanks everyone, we'll see you again next week.
Those of you that want to identify with the Venus Project, you have to read our book, The Best That Money Can't Buy. You have to look at our tapes, but if you go around asking the same questions over again, those are called loops. They don't go anywhere. If you want to know what going somewhere means, you have to look into the Venus Project before you ask questions. Look at our website, learn more about it, then ask questions. Most people do not know how to ask questions. They make all kinds of statements. If you read about the Venus Project and then you ask questions pinpointing aspects of the Venus Project, you will learn more about it.
Thanks, Jacque. Okay, thanks everyone.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to attempt to answer your questions.